Welcome to video number 13, Organize and Fight Tyranny. And as we watched in video number 12, we saw how frustrated the colonists were with the taxation without representation. And we know that we find ourselves today in very much the same situation. Elected officials who in large part don't represent us after being elected. Most are more worried about their wallets than they are doing what's right, and certainly more than protecting our liberties and freedoms. So what did the colonists do back then? They organized and secretly forming groups to fight against the tyranny of King George. And the English Parliament, whether by mouth, pamphlets, mobs, whatever it was, they met and they loved to publish their ideas of freedom and why it was important to them. And they would discuss politics in secret and publish these ideas under pseudonyms. Some organizations, they weren't so secretive, and they were fairly outspoken and in front. I want to talk about those things, but those men cared more deeply about their liberty than anything else. And they met in these secret places across the countries, mostly in taverns and inns. And without a doubt, probably the most famous location being the Green Dragon Tavern, located in Boston. It's still there today. And they met in those places to plot resistance measures. These like-minded patriots may have been part of one or many groups, right? One of the earliest groups was called the Boston Caucus, actually started by Samuel Adams's father and 20 other men. They met and caucused to plan who to introduce into certain places of trust and power in the political realm and in the influencers. Then each would leave and they would use their circle of influence and change things, right? They would motivate people to do things. Later, another group not many people know about called the Loyal Nine. And this group was made up of 9 men. John Avery, a distiller, Henry Bass, Thomas Case as a distiller, Stephen Cleverly, a brazier, Thomas Crafts, a painter, Benjamin Eads, the printer of the Boston Gazette, Joseph Field, a ship's captain, John Smith, a brazier, and George Trott, a jeweler. And why do I give you their names, and why do I tell you their occupations? Because they were ordinary men who fought and resisted tyranny in a variety of ways. They put up anti-Stamp Act posters all over Boston. They led protests and hung in effigy from the Tree of Liberty, the Liberty Tree, like I got right behind me, the British stamp distributor Andrew Oliver. So this is very much what they would do. They would organize to create interest and make people question what's going on. They also identified targets for the mobs, and they would send mobs in and to create havoc a little bit and cause uncertainty. Ironically, those mobs didn't burn down entire cities and loot and pillage everything. They would just go out and make sure, and the organizers could control them. And this is important to know, because there's a grand difference between what they did and what we see happening in our own country from the mobs that are burning down our cities. We know of other groups like the North End Caucus as well, but the most famous group would have to be the Sons of Liberty, started by Samuel Adams himself, John Adams, Paul Revere, and John Hancock. This group was no doubt inspired by the Loyal Nine, but by 1765, the Sons of Liberty was inspiring all kinds of groups across various communities, and they took upon themselves also the name the Sons of Liberty. So there were all of these groups organizing all over the place, known as the Sons of Liberty. Lastly, I would mention probably one of my favorites, known as the Committee of Correspondence. And this committee formed in response to British appointed judges being paid by the British to negate the loyalty those judges in those communities felt to the colonists, right? And these men in each community, a group of men would meet and go over current political events and then communicate their thoughts and ideas to other similar committees through messengers or pamphlets or letter, or sometimes they sent messengers out just to vocalize and talk about the ideas. This became the first real political bond many in the different colonies had felt and appreciated. In fact, these committees of correspondence eventually became the very body that brought about the first Continental Congress of 1774. That's pretty impressive. And what I want to point out is that a very few men and women made all the difference in the world as they fought for our liberties. These magnificent few fought corruption, tyranny, despotism, and at the very edge of losing everything, they changed the course of history for you and I. And Edward G. Griffin said, to oppose corruption in government is the highest obligation of patriotism. Benjamin Franklin said, those that can give up essential liberty to gain a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty or safety. And lastly, I would say this, in Dietrich Bonhoeffer's words, silence in the face of evil is evil itself. God will not hold us guiltless, nor to speak, not to speak is to speak, not to act is to act. And I want all of you to recognize these people back then were able to organize and form groups to fight the tyranny and to create awareness in their communities. And this is what we've got to start doing to support and uphold our Constitution and to defend our liberties and freedoms. Jus meum tovor.